Hey everybody, today I am in Plainfield, Indiana, and I'm actually along US 40, which is Main Street that runs really right through the heart of Plainfield. In fact, right now I'm crossing White Lick Creek, and we're going to talk about Plainfield just a little bit in this video, see what it has to offer, and see that it really, even though it has the name Plainfield, it's anything but plain. So we'll explore it a little bit and kind of let you know what it's like, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, I'm Jason Compton with the Compton Home Group. Welcome back to the channel. If it's your first time to the channel and you want to know everything there is to know about places like Plainfield, Indiana, any of the suburbs surrounding Indianapolis, or Indianapolis itself, then make sure you hit that subscribe button and tap the little bell so you're notified every time we do a new video each and every week. Now, we get reach outs of all types from people all over the Indy Metro and all over the country with questions about places like Plainfield, any of the Indianapolis suburbs, and of course Indianapolis itself. So if you have questions at all, then reach out any way you know how, and we'll absolutely have your back with those questions. And we'll also have your back when it comes to your move to the Indy Metro or within the Indy Metro. So again, today I'm in Plainfield, Indiana, and Plainfield, Indiana, it's on the west side of Indianapolis, actually in Hendricks County, and it's the largest town in Hendricks County. Marion County pretty much makes up all of Indianapolis, or at least Indianapolis takes up most of Marion County, and then when you get just outside of it, you're Hendricks County. So some of the other towns that you'd find there would be Brownsburg to the north, Avon just to the north as well, and then in the southern part you get into Plainfield. And 267 is pretty much the north-south road that connects all of those. So I'm in the southernmost portion really of Hendricks County, and again, Plainfield is the largest town, although it's not a huge town, but it is larger than Brownsburg and Avon. And right now I'm walking along White Lick Creek Trail, and it's a little bit of a windy day actually. You might hear a little bit of that. So Plainfield is certainly growing, and they're doing a lot to accommodate that growth. So if you look back in the year 2000, there was about 18,000 people or so in Plainfield. And then when you get all the way up into 2010, there's about 28,000. And now in 2020, when this video is being shot, there's about 35,000 or so people here in Plainfield. So it's definitely a place that's grown quite a bit. And I find Plainfield so incredibly interesting because unlike a lot of other suburbs, which might just have one or two things to offer, and that's not necessarily a knock on any suburb at all. For example, Avon to the north, there's a lot to be said that's good about Avon. And then of course I'm walking actually under US 40 right now, a bridge over the top of me. But it also doesn't have a tremendous amount, and that's actually one of the things that makes it so attractive. It's a very quiet suburb, definitely. But Plainfield has a little bit of that, but it also has a lot of some other things too. So Plainfield, with its location really close to the Indianapolis International Airport, is a fantastic location for a lot of people. And of course, if you fly for your job quite often, then it could be a place that, obviously gives you a really short drive to the airport. But also on the far eastern side of Plainfield, you've got a ton of warehouses for really big companies like Amazon and Home Depot and a bunch of other just miscellaneous, even smaller companies that are consolidated out there. So a lot of distribution centers. I think there's close to 46 million square feet of warehouse space in that whole warehouse complex way on the east side of Plainfield. So it's hard to put that into perspective as exactly how much that is, but it is a heck of a lot. And if you were to drive through it, you get a pretty good sense of how many warehouses are out there and how big some of these buildings actually are. But that particular area, it accounts for roughly half of all of the warehouse jobs in Indianapolis. So that's just right here in Plainfield. So 36,000 people or so. And you can definitely bet that a lot of people that live here in Plainfield work within those warehouse complexes with all kinds of different jobs. So a lot of opportunity as far as that goes. And if it's something that, I work on the west side or I work in that particular complex, Plainfield could be a pretty good place for you just because of that location and then its vicinity to the airport. So that's really probably the reason why most of those warehouses are there. But Plainfield has actually been pretty smart about letting those places in and then using, of course, a lot of the revenue that's generated from those warehouses being there to improving the city itself. So I told you there's a lot going on in Plainfield, but also once you get off of US 40, which goes right through the heart of Plainfield, which is Main Street, it becomes much more quiet. So it doesn't have to be a bustling, busy place like you would think it is out in those warehouses. In fact, when you get off of 40, it's actually really quite quiet. And it's affordable too. So it's actually one of the most affordable suburbs that you're gonna find anywhere around the Indianapolis area. So the median home sale price is roughly $235,000, $240,000. So that's not too bad, especially when you compare it to some of those north side suburbs like Zionsville, which is right at $400,000. You get into Carmel, it's in the upper threes, and you get into Fishers, and it's definitely well over $300,000. So you can get a lot for your money in Plainfield, but the location certainly still has to be right for you. Now the schools in Plainfield are absolutely very highly rated, A on niche.com. And the interesting thing also about the schools in Plainfield, especially at the high school level, when we're talking just about that, is that it's not that big. And even though Plainfield is larger than Avon or Brownsburg in Hendricks County, the schools in Avon and Brownsburg are certainly much larger than they are in Plainfield. Plainfield's school population there at the high school is roughly 1,700 students. And when you compare that to, let's say, Avon, which is over 3,000, and then Brownsburg, which isn't too far off of that, it's pretty amazing to see that Plainfield, even though it's a much bigger suburb, you've got a smaller population at the high school, but very highly rated schools for sure, very, very popular. So with everything that's going on in Plainfield, with the warehouses, with US 40 going right through town, I mean, you can pretty much find anything that you want along US 40 or not that far off US 40. In fact, there's one of the biggest shopping complexes really in all of Indianapolis just off of US 40 on the far eastern side of Plainfield called Perry Crossing. And it's been developed as a huge outdoor mall. So pretty much any shop you can think of is either there or very close by. So we're talking just about everything that you could possibly need. But in there, they've created also kind of a town center where they have movies and festivals and just a lot of other stuff going on. So it's a little bit like a newer downtown, but it's not just for Plainfield residents. So if you live in Indianapolis and you want to do some shopping, you've got downtown Indy, you can go to the north side, you can go to the south side in Greenwood as well, but you can also come out here to Plainfield and get just about anything it is that you could possibly want or need. Now, when you're going along US 40, let's say right there at Perry Crossing, or you even get into the older historic downtown area of Plainfield, which is super, super cool, and also in a huge development phase or redevelopment phase. So over the next 10 to 15 years, there's a lot that will be happening and continue to happen right there along that. But just Plainfield as a whole, when you're talking 35 to 36,000 people, you'd think, especially when it's kind of seemingly condensed right there along US 40, that it would feel exceptionally crowded. But it doesn't. Actually, it's very sparse, honestly, once you get off of that. So when you look at Indianapolis just as a whole, there's about 2,500 or so, make sure nobody's coming here on this trail, 2,500 people or so per square mile. And just to kind of put that into perspective a little bit, New York City is about 28,000 people per square mile. So obviously a lot more dense. Even a place like Miami, Florida, about 13,000 people per square mile. So exceptionally dense. Indianapolis, not so much. Doesn't feel terribly crowded there. But when you get into Plainfield, it's only about 1,400 people per square mile. So when you're at a place like Perry Crossing, you might get the wrong impression about Plainfield and the fact that maybe this place is just way too busy for me and way too crowded. You don't have to travel too far off of that to realize that it's really not. Actually, it's one of the things that makes Plainfield really so attractive. It's just the fact that you can have that if you want it, but then you can be away from it very quickly if you want to do that too. And one of the other things that makes Plainfield so attractive to people, and I don't think people really realize this until they come and spend some time here, because it might be difficult to see just when you're passing through, and is that Plainfield, as far as a suburb is concerned, has one of the best trail systems that you could really imagine. So, you're talking a town of 36,000 people, and it has over 20 miles of trails, which is just kind of obnoxious. That's an awful lot. And there are more being constructed, and of course the ones that exist right now, they're being extended or added to. So 20 miles right now is kind of a conservative number. If we come back and visit in 4 or 5 years, it's probably going to be quite a bit more than that. And what's neat is that unlike a lot of trails that just kind of plow right through a town from north to south or east to west, and that's it, the trail system here winds around all over the place. Now you have different names, like right now I told you I'm on the White Lick Creek Trail, but there's some others in here too. And you can, for the most part, not unless you get way out in some of the really residential areas, way to the south, way to the north, but if you are going just around town, is that these trails can nearly connect you with, I wouldn't say everything, but you can get very, very close. So if you're walking or running or you're riding your bike, now of course you're probably only doing that during the warm weather months, but you could still do it in the winter if you want to. And that makes it exceptionally safe, pedestrian friendly, and for a suburb, I mean, pretty walkable. And there aren't a lot of suburbs that can really say that. A lot of suburbs just are extremely residential. They get to sprawl out and get very spread out, and if you want to get anywhere within that suburb, you've got to drive. And then you park, and then you get out, and you don't walk really all that far. I would consider that actually quite plain. But Plainfield is really truly the opposite of that. Now, where Plainfield actually gets its name from is that this area was settled by Friends, or the Quakers. And they were plain people, and they called themselves plain, and so this just ended up being Plainfield. In fact, the Quaker theme you will see running through the town in all kinds of places where there are roads named that. In fact, 267 on the southern end of Plainfield is Quaker Boulevard. If you get off of I-70 on 267, that's one of the ways you can get into Plainfield. It's called Quaker Boulevard there. Plainfield High School, the mascot, are the Quakers. So it's certainly a running theme for here for sure. But Plainfield is anything but plain. I am a very big fan of Plainfield, given all of those things we've talked about here today, especially with that location, very, very close to the airport, although sometimes it might feel like you're close to the airport, depending on which way airplanes are flying that day. But for the most part, being so close, not too bad. Not too bad at all, in fact. But it has a tremendous amount to offer here for a small town and a suburb of Indianapolis. So if you have any questions about Plainfield at all, or Indianapolis in general, or any of the other suburbs, then make sure that you reach out, because we'll have your back with those questions, and we certainly always have your back with your move. And until the next one, we'll see you later.